Hello, BookTube. I've got some mail for you today on a very beautiful Ides of March. What could possibly go wrong? It's the type of day, the type of afternoon where you instinctively feel like you should take your coat off, like you can walk around in just a hoodie or your shirt sleeves. And unlike the two occasions this winter that have also been true, this time it feels real. This time it doesn't feel like a fluke. It feels like actual weather instead of a fluke. Just delightful. And it allows me to do something with the bean that I love to do, that I don't get to do when the temperature is horrible, when the weather is horrible, which is to just let her walk, let her pick the pace, let her stop anywhere she wants for as long as she wants, without hurrying along because both of us are freezing our giblets off. So we're going to have a few walks today, but that still leaves time for my imaginary booktube friends, now doesn't it? Especially after all the emails that I have received, and I'm still receiving, about that little interruption in service that we had because of a rogue live stream. Those of you who might not have watched the whole drama unfold, I did a ninja live stream where I just started a live stream. I had a bunch of things to talk about. A whole bunch of people joined me. We were having a fun time. And then not only did I get booted out of the live stream, but I couldn't stop it from going on. It was just going on and on and on. And that infuriated me. And I made a video that I shouldn't have made. I made a video when I was infuriated saying, I was going to keep checking with YouTube to try and get that live stream shut down, and that I was going to forget about BookTube for a while. I mentioned in the course of that video that I made one offhand mention of the fact that I might have to delete my channel. I wasn't doing that to be a kind of histrionic git. I was doing that because I thought I would have to delete my channel in order to stop that live stream. Not because I wanted, out of a fit of pique, to throw crockery or anything like that. That was not the case. But like I said, I have time for my imaginary booktube friends because of all the wonderful emails that you have been sending me. Just incredible. Saying that, you sympathize completely with the frustration of that kind of technological snafu, especially since a lot of you agreed with me that YouTube could fix it instantly if they wanted to. They just don't want to. And I wondered for a while, why would YouTube incur intentionally frustrated users like that? And then I realized that the answer is very simple. They want live streams to go on forever. It's the YouTube dream business model is to have it so that you can't ever look away from their platform. They want it to go on forever. Of course, they haven't made a big, bright, neon red end live stream button. Of course, they haven't done that. I'm amazed that you can end the live stream under normal circumstances ever. But we have one periodical. And some packages, including a box. And the periodical is the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement, my favorite of all the English language literary journals that are out there. And I was all over the map with this issue of the TLS. The place where we usually go first is the letters column, and there was a fun thing in the letters column that I want to read through. There's a lot of fun stuff, but there's a fun thing here, a letter from New York. A letter writer writes in, Martin Gornow helpfully illuminates how Philippa Foot's rejection of moral relativism was motivated by her revulsion at the crimes of the Nazis. The notion of objective morality has been generally unfashionable among philosophers and other intellectuals in the West for about a century. In Essays on Moral Realism, a sympathetic Geoffrey Sayer McCord imagined a shamefaced moral realist philosopher on a television talk show confessing the indignities to which he was led by his unpopular belief in moral objectivity. I kept a copy of Hitler, A Study in Tyranny, in the icebox, and when no one was around, I took it out and I would chant, the Nazis were bad. The Nazis were really bad. For the age-old debate about moral relativism, naturally, coming from my own background and looking at the world the way I do not understand such a debate at all. Only humans would even have such a debate, or could, but I thought that was pretty funny, where you keep a biography of Hitler in the icebox. So you're a moral realist, but when you pull it out just to console yourself, you keep chanting, the Nazis were really bad, objectively bad. But there's a nice long review in here by Mary Norris of Burning Questions. which we've seen on this channel a few times, a new collection of occasional prose and nonfiction by Margaret Atwood. And the review is fantastic. It goes on for 2 full pages. It's fantastic. It's really knowing. Really does a good job with the book, which I tremendously liked. But I don't know what to think about the piece itself, because at one point, what is it, 3 paragraphs in, Mary Norris starts her 4th paragraph by saying, "Is this the place to mention I've never read The Handmaid's Tale?" What on earth? I would say no, that's not the place to mention that you haven't read The Handmaid's Tale. That you really like this Melville guy, and you're going to get around to this Moby something or other book that he wrote. No, that's not the place to mention that you haven't read The Handmaid's Tale. You either mention that in the very first sentence of your 2,000-word piece so that every single reader who has a brain in their head can stop reading right then, or you mention that to your editor when you're pitching the piece so that they can shoot you down. But instead, neither one of those happened. So you're invested in this piece by the time you realize that the author of the piece has not read the author of the book under review's most famous book. But anyway, the other thing that caught my interest in this issue was FOMO. I used to travel. I've done an enormous amount of traveling. I will not do any more traveling. So now when I see a write-up of some event of some kind that is happening, in other words, it's not a book that I might be able to get from a publisher, it's a live event that I'm never going to see, I automatically feel just a tremendous pang. And there were 2 of those back-to-back in the TLS this time around on facing pages. One is an art exhibit in Venice of the sculptor Antonio Canova, whose work is absolutely incredible. Sculpture is my favorite art form, and this is, I guess, a big display of great works, probably scrounged from all of Italy. I would love to see it. And also at the Donmar Warehouse, Emma Smith writes up a performance of Shakespeare's Henry V that I guess is supposed to I guess that the critics are seeing all sorts of paramilitary echoes of the war in Ukraine in this performance, because the actors are all wearing fatigues. They're all wearing modern-day dress with rifles and whatnot. And it stars Kit Harington of Game of Thrones fame, who's sliding his way into the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the Black Knight. He is Henry V, and I want to see that exhibit in Venice, and I also want to see this Henry V, even though the reviewer, Emma Smith, pans Kit Harington's performance, and does so very knowingly. When she's reviewing this thing, sometimes when you're reading, especially a Shakespeare theatrical review, sometimes you've got a 900-year-old critic, and they just didn't want to be there. Maybe the wine at intermission was bad, or they just broke up with their most reliable rent boy or whatever, and they just let that loose in the review. Old hands at the theater, like Kit Harington, know perfectly well that such reviews are in their future, and they disregard them. Everybody sensible disregards them. The one group of people who don't disregard those reviews are, once again, commissioning editors who ought to read them and say, "I'm sorry, darling, Basil, but we can't use this. This sort of stuff went out in the 1960s. We don't write reviews like this anymore. No one's interested in your fits of pique." but editors don't say that. But this was not one of those reviews. This would be, I of course don't know Kit Harington, but this would, I imagine, be one of those reviews that's tough to read. Again, I want to stress a point that's come up on this channel many times with regard to authors, but whether it's authors, singers, especially actors, any kind of foaming at the mouth, eyes up in the head, completely uncontrolled narcissist, anything like that, whether it's a politician or an artist or an actor or a musician or an author, the standard line that comes up is that they don't read any of their reviews. Many of them, when they're being interviewed for the Paris Review, will tell that lie. And many others, it's said about them by sycophants who are doing their interviews for Esquire or Vanity Fair or whatever. I want to stress again, as I've said on this channel many times in the past, that is always untrue. 100% of the time, always untrue. That is always a bald-faced black and white lie. People like Robert Pattinson or Kit Harington or whoever consume their reviews, live on them, absolutely live on them, and can memorize them and recite them back to you word for word decades later. So let's not have any of this business about how they don't pay any attention to their press. But I've known many actors, especially, who said there are two types of reviews, and they characterize them the way I've described it. That on the one type of review, there's the reviewer where you just know they're just some old theater queen who's having a bad day, and you know you can disregard it. You know you can disregard the whole review, and you hope that other people do too. The real injustice with those kinds of reviews, the first kind of review, is that they can close a show totally unfairly, because the critic doesn't care about what they've seen. There's another kind of review where the critic does care, and if you get panned by that kind of a critic, it hurts. It sticks with you. But even so, even if the show is panned, I would still like to see it. And even if I had a magic wand that could transport me to the theater tonight to see the show, I wouldn't do it. Even if I could, I wouldn't do it because we're still in a pandemic. I know a lot of you have just forgotten those old restrictions, and God bless that you're so comfortable. I could not do it. I just could not do it. No way. But anyway, that is the one periodical at the 11-minute mark. Now we'll move on to the books. A good selection. There's a box, like I mentioned. There's also one of these envelopes is fairly thick, so it could be a finished copy, which is good. Oh, great. Okay. All right. Publisher actually sent me this. This is from Chelsea Green, the publisher, Chelsea Green. We've seen them before. They've come up many times. This is the new book by Derek Gow, G-O-W. And this is Birds, Beasts, and Bedlam, Turning My Farm into an Ark for Lost Species. Now, some of you may, with an encyclopedic memory, may remember that this guy came up before on this channel from Chelsea Green Publishing. He a couple of years ago did a book on rewilding beavers. And I read it. I really liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. And more than, in addition to enjoying it, I really like getting to know this guy. He seems to be genuinely heroic. And this is his next book, A Thin Little Thing. This comes out in June. And his first book, Bringing Back the Beaver, was his riotously funny and subversive account of reintroducing beavers to Britain. In this book, a must-read for fans of Mary Roach's Fuzz and Nate Blakesley's American Wolf, tells the story of the author's rewilding journey and his work to save many more species by transforming his Devon farm into a wildlife breeding center. It wouldn't matter to me. This could be, him writing about his laundry. I enjoyed. This has original illustrations. Look at that. The tree frog. Oh wow, fantastic! I wonder if the illustrations are by the author. There's some rats. Are you going to tell me? I wonder if you'll tell me if this is by the author. You want to credit the illustrator, yes? Okay, no illustrator is credited, so maybe these are by the author. The back cover says black and white illustrations throughout, but does not say who did them. I'm assuming the only person who wouldn't kick up a fuss about that is the author himself. But anyway, this comes out in June. I can, as I mention all the time on this channel, I mention the credit in the International Bank of Steve, and his credit is as high as it gets. Then we'll do this next one here. It's fairly heavy, and it's one of these perilous envelopes where you can just feel that they're loaded with asbestos. Ordinarily, I have to be very careful about the pull tab. Very gentle and slow to try and dislodge as little of it as possible. But some wanker taped the pull tab down. I have no choice now but to unleash all the asbestos in the world in this thing. I don't really want to do that. Oh, goodness gracious. Yes, an endless amount of emails from all of my imaginary friends on BookTube telling me how happy they are that I did not delete my channel. I wanted to make sure that I let you know that was never a diva thing. I was not going to delete my channel because I was angry. I was going to delete it because I didn't want a live stream to continue. If I had had to do that, I would have made another channel right away. Okay, I've almost got this open. Exciting. Oh, goodness gracious. Ugh. Okay. Well, that's everything. Let's get that out of there. Oh, oh, fantastic. Okay, this is not from a publisher, but this is definitely not a violation of rule number one. Some people are exempt from a violation of rule number one. This is from Mark Richardson up in Vermont. He found this thing. I want to get the plastic off it. He found this thing up at Ollie's, big all-purpose warehouse thing that has everything really cheap and totally irregular shipments. They don't know what they're going to get from one day to the next. They have a book section, and the book section is pretty interesting. And one of the features of the book section that's pretty interesting is the comics and graphic novels. And Mark found this up there for a song, so he got it for me. This is Detective Comics, 80 Years of Batman. There we have Batman on the cover, superimposed on a whole bunch of covers. I don't think you get a gallery of covers in here. I don't think that's going to happen. It'd be really neat if it did. No, okay. But instead what you get here is just stories from Detective Comics ranging over those 80 years. So I imagine I will have read almost all of these, but it's just all full color. There's Clayface, his origin story. Yeah, I imagine I will have read all of these at one point or another, because Batman his adventures have been in reprints forever and ever and ever. I'm kind of curious about some of these covers on the background. There's Detective Comics number 500. That had a wraparound cover, and one of the stories in that was Batman meeting Sherlock Holmes. Don't ask. And another story, it was a prose, in Detective Comics 500, there was a prose story with illustrations, I think by Mike Kaluta. But it was mostly a prose short story. And it also was really, really weird. A really strange story. In which the Batman encounters a fiendish supervillain, and he is bested in the second act, as he always is. And the fiendish supervillain has his men take off Batman's cape and take off his utility belt, flatten him on the ground, and tie him in an elaborate, we're led to believe, Fu Manchu style Oriental series of knots where the mere osmotic pressure of his breathing will eventually strangle him to death. And the whole of the story was the writer of the story was the writer Jerry Conway. I don't think I remember. I have the issue here somewhere. The whole of the story was the methods by which Batman frees himself, and all I could think the whole time was, no, the villain, once they had him flat down and trussed like a Thanksgiving turkey, they would just shoot him 10 times in the head. They wouldn't be, in 15 hours, you may suffocate. But some of these others I recognize as well. Some of these other issues I recognize as well. Wow, okay. And this one has the fearsome foot fighters. They kick Batman quite a bit, if I remember correctly. All right, well, this is fantastic. Many, many thanks to Mark. I will go through this. This will have Dick Irvin. This will have probably Mike Golden. Wow, fantastic. Okay, so Detective Comics, 80 Years of Batman, with a minimum amount of fuss. Now we'll move on to this. This next one is big and fat. Barely got to me without bursting out of the package. What have we got here? Oh, fantastic. Oh, my. Okay. We've already talked about this. I imagine I will be talking about it again. This is the finished copy of Antonio Scarati's M, Son of the Century. This is translated from the Italian by Anne Milano Appel, and she does a fantastic job. Incredible job. This is a big, fat novel about Benito Mussolini. Believe it or not, I calls him like I sees him. This is a big, fat novel about Benito Mussolini, particularly the first few years of his public life. A little bit from the childhood and youth, but the first few years of his public life. And the slow torturous formation of fascism. And this was a hit in Italy. It won the Strega Prize and sold a lot of copies, and was has been talked about as a kind of as this author's answer to Wolf Hall, where Hilary Mantel takes a morally dicey figure from the past, Thomas Cromwell, and loads him with details. Just fleshes out with fiction his life in immense numbers of details. Not necessarily courting our sympathy, but definitely wanting to see him as human. This does the exact same thing with what I would have thought, if anything, was an even less likely candidate. I'm the only person in the world who takes the trouble to remember that Thomas Cromwell was a absolute a-hole, horrible creature, a monster, a walking, talking human guillotine, who deserved every bit the fate he got. I'm the only person in the world who remembers that. Thanks to Hilary Mantel, he's kind of the anti-hero's anti-hero. And this is every bit as good. Allow me to be the first English language critic to say this is every bit as good as Wolf Hall. I am hoping, very much hoping, that this gets the attention that Wolf Hall did once it breaks out of the small prison of Italian literature. What do the Italians know about literature anyway? Once this becomes there's no sheet in here, but this comes out in April, and I'm really hoping that it gets attention. I'm really hoping that it doesn't disappear, because it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I cannot recommend it strongly enough, if you believe it or not. Even if you think you're the last person in the world who would enjoy a long novel about Benito Mussolini, believe me, I would have thought I was. You should request this from your library, pre-order it, whatever you want to do. Don't miss it. This is one of the first of books of 2022 that elicits that just plain don't miss it response in me. And then we'll do the box, which is not big and not heavy, so it might not be a Steve book. Although this has been a fine mail haul, so I'm not really going to mourn if this is not a Steve book. Let's get all this stuff out of here. Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. This is from Simon & Schuster. I don't know if we've seen this already on this channel. Maybe an e-copy. This is by Jeffrey Frank, and it is The Trials of Harry Truman. And this is by the author of Ike and Dick. Truman is often portrayed as stolid and decisive with a homespun manner. But the man who emerges here is far more complex than the give-him-hell provincial who, at age 60, suddenly inherited the White House. Jeffrey Frank reveals a self-taught man, blessed with keen political instincts, but carried along by the rush of events and inclined to make what he called jump decisions, intuitive choices that bolstered a reputation for firmness, but came with the risk of tragic missteps. During nearly 80 years in office, Truman remained deeply, even movingly human, insecure, patriotic, and torn between his Missouri upbringing and what he saw as his duty to support equal rights for black Americans. And this is, it's got, oh God, look at all of these blurbs. It's got tons of advanced blurbs from authors on the back. And the author is a contributor to the New Yorker and has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Guardian, and Book Forum. I've never written for Book Forum. I'd very much like to write for Book Forum. Among other publications. He's the former senior editor at the New Yorker and deputy editor at the Washington Post Outlook section. And he's the author of Ike and Dick, Portrait of a Strange Political Marriage. I could swear that I reviewed Ike and Dick, or did I review The Apprentice? Maybe I did. There was another book about Eisenhower's relationship with Nixon, and I might have reviewed that instead. I'll try to find it, whichever it was. Okay, great. Well, this is his new book. This is also this came out today. Last Tuesday? Might have come out last Tuesday, the early part of March. Fantastic. Glad to have this. All right, so we have history, natural history, historical fiction, and The Dark Knight. So we have The Trials of Harry Truman. We have M, Son of the Century. You haven't heard me talk about a new release like this so far in 2022. Take that for what it's worth. This is the first time in 2022 that I'm using this kind of language about a new release. don't miss it. Don't miss it. It is brilliant. And all the brilliance in the world wouldn't save it if it weren't brilliantly translated. Uh, uh, I just said her name a second ago, but it's gone right out of my head. But Anne Milano Appel, is that right? Yes, Anne Milano Appel deserves a huge amount of credit here. This is a masterful, masterful work of translation. Then we have Birds, Beasts, and Bedlam, in which the author tells us the stories of rewilding animals, not just beavers, but all kinds of animals. And finally, Detective Comics, 80 Years of Batman. Not a bad mail haul. So very good. Very pleased. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.